Good afternoon. I'm delighted to be with you all this afternoon. I've not been moderating these conferences for a while, as you can understand, so I'm delighted to talk about digital transformation in your environment. The crisis we're living through, and you've seen this, only seems to be accelerating processes, and this makes the topic of digital transformation even more important and in the news. So I'll do what I usually do with this type of conference, and that's look at basics, go back to basics, and look at the situation and look at why we have this acceleration of this digital revolution. Now, this gentleman, I know him. I really think that he's fantastic. He should have obtained the Nobel Prize for Economics. He's one of the 4 people who invented the microprocessor. In 1969, he said the following. It was a very... he said microprocessors are adapted or double in power every 2 months, and this happened until 2015. And when you do multiply things by 2 or twofold over a period of 40 years, you go from a microprocessor with 12,000 transmitters, and you end up with 10 billion of them. This has amazing results. In computers 45 years ago, they looked like this. They were not very powerful in general. And then little by little things improved. Over a few years, we saw these computers in big major companies, and then after a while we saw them in small companies. We talked about microcomputing, and this was totally appropriate. And then after the year 2000, we saw them coming into our homes, connected computers, in mass used in the Western world in households. Only 250,000 people were connected at that time to the internet. And so another revolution happened, and then it turned this distribution into a massive distribution. And that, of course, revolution is the smartphone. In 2010, just under 1 billion people were connected to the internet. And if I were to illustrate once again this Moore's law, I would say that in these equipment there's 100,000 more calculation power than all of the power that was available to calculate at the time when Mr. Moore was quoting what I just quoted in 1969. 100 times more power than all of the in one piece of equipment than all of the equipment that was available on Earth at the time. So things are carrying on. It's now 2020. This is the 3rd best-sold phone on Earth. You've never heard of it before. That's normal. It's only being sold in emerging places. That has the power of an iPhone 5, and it's worth $15. This is a very good illustration of Moore's law. Is the explanation of the revolution you're seeing around you. So for a small amount of money, you can transport information, store it, and process it. Now today, in 2020, we have a cost ratio only in relation to the year 2000, 20 years previously, that's a factor 70,000. So what you were doing as an administrator of data for €1 million in the year 2000, you're doing it for €15 today. And this shows, actually, this dynamic stopped or came to an end in 2015, but actually it is carrying on because there are all sorts of things and different processes that enable us to carry on innovating. Between now and 2025, analysis shows that 100 billion objects will be connected, and in the world of property is a very high consumer of connected objects. So what they say is first universe of connected items are supply chains, second environment is industry, and the third environment is property in general. So there are going to be many things happening, and that's really what I'm going to be talking about. The follow-up in terms of calculation power is not, or computing power, doesn't stop there. So Moore's law, the multiprocessors, increasing the calculation or computer power, and then there are all sorts of breakthrough technologies. The best known is the cloud, but there are more sort of breakthrough ones, quantum computing or computer, with growth upwards through Moore's law over the long mid to long term. We don't know if this is going to be reality, but this is something that's fantastic. France just decided to invest 1 billion euros in this technology, quantum computing, and it's very promising in general. Third era, big mainframe computers, specialized for 1 to 2 tasks, the era of microcomputers and smartphones, what you have in your pocket, and we've just added a graphic interface onto these mainframes, and we've made the size smaller. You have more or less the same thing. And then an era that we can't see the importance of for the moment, and that's AI. IA, sorry, that's going to be totally revolutionary. If you were just to retain one thing from IA, that's that it can adapt to environments that are highly non-predictable. So, for example, driving a car is one of them. And where they found it hard to go was in the world of services. And this is something that is happening in a massive way now. So this means that you can make savings in opportunity, in terms of opportunity. So people such as Shannon, as he said this, you put information into a complex system and it makes it more complex with this structure. So the discussion on 5G, for many reasons, it's absurd, I would say, but we could actually talk about this, and this is why I think this. Countries such as Africa, a continent such as Africa, with no mineral resources, and over the past 15 years they have growth that's higher than others, 5.5% with aggregated figures in Africa and 2.7% in the rest of the world. And if you put information into a system that's has low development, this information means that you optimize the flows, and the growth is therefore moderately high in these countries. That's what you see. You can see in these countries, 16 countries, the growth of GDP on the red line, and then telecom growth and the massive improvement, and then this has an effect on the GDP per capita, which is a significant increase and improvement. And you can see this. This is the World Bank figure. Between now and 2027, it's going to lead to massive development through connected telephones, smartphones. All of this is possible because of innovation. Kenya MP5 has the first monetary flow, or is the first monetary flow in the country. Almost 50% of cash flow is managed through this smartphone, because in general we all have a capability to create data. You're all doing it. You do it when you go onto social networks, but even with a mobile phone that's inert, you create data. And this means data means intelligence, and it's the wisdom of the public, of the audience, as they often say, and they bring this information together, such as Wikipedia. Wikipedia is an encyclopedia. If you print it, it's 250 meters high. There are fewer mistakes per page in Wikipedia than in Britannica, that is made and computed by Oxford and Cambridge universities. So this is, of course, the positive aspect of the technology, and we'll talk about the negative aspects of this revolution later on. But what you need to understand is that this is more and more on a capillary system, It's more and more spread around all over the place. It goes where it was not before because technology allows it. TCP/IP is the basic infrastructure for the internet. And there are also other technologies that mean that you can decentralize computing, blockchains, and the software-defined networks, SDNs, within 5G that mean that networks in companies mainly become totally virtualized or virtual. Wherever you are, you're protected by the same security or safe security system of your new company, whether you might be whether you're at home in Nice or Dunkirk. And all of this is based on the idea of data, and this idea of data has developed substantially and has done over the past few years. So, for example, if you look at things 20 years ago, you were just in a structured data environment. We didn't know how to differentiate between structured and non-structured. If you were if you were in charge of the art collection at the Louvre, you could only just put this information into the database, and you could only do searches with keywords that you could have previously chosen. So you could sort, for example, the works of art by saying, I want the portraits. If you had a tab with portraits, you could then find the portraits. 20 years later, you can say, off the cuff, please, could you give me all of the portraits that include a young girl with a blue sort of head scarf, and red lipstick. And so you can do this now, and this is because of big data and artificial intelligence that we're going to talk about in a moment. Now, I was talking about the reduction in cost. That's fantastic. And the data administrators today are able to do things and access artificial intelligence and massively process data in an unexpected way. Only 10 years ago, we would not have been able to predict that this type of powerful tool would have been available to everyone through, thanks, among other things, the cloud. AI is another revolution, and it started in the years 2000 through a certain number of breakthrough discoveries and technologies. We discovered what are called the convolutional areas, discovered by a Frenchman called Yam Lequen, and we were able to assemble hundreds of thousands of pictures of dogs and cats. If you want to differentiate a dog from a cat in AI, you need lots and lots of different examples. And in fact, that's one of the major breakthroughs that's not been that we've not gone beyond. If you show an 18-month-old child a dog and a cat, for all their life they'll know the difference between a dog and a cat. AI is not able to do this yet. However, having had the internet that brought as you do this in Google, that shows you images and gives you access to hundreds of thousands of different references for anything. This has increased the speed of learning of artificial intelligence systems. That's why data is an essential sovereign element. If you have data, you have intelligence, you have potential for development, and this is a very strong thing. And then third breakthrough, of course, is the invention of a new category of microprocessors called GPUs. They've been able to increase very, very much the power of calculation by a factor 10,000, and this was in 2006. So this all means that the world is in a phase or in a period of acceleration at the moment. And even though I told you that Moore's law was put into question for the number of transistors on a silica slab that can no longer be used more, we see now the explosion of a revolution and a development that we think will lead in the next few years to self-driving cars, totally autonomous, no longer need for any steering wheel. And this was something that a few years ago, or 3-4 years ago, was just a hypothesis and a possibility. Today, scientists are all agreeing on the fact that this is going to be something that will be possible. Now, where the revolution is something we can actually see and smell is in what is called meta-digital companies, or GAFAs, or GAFAMs in French. No one would have been able to guess that in 30 years we would have had companies worth billions of dollars, and that these would have taken over in terms of wealth, the wealth of oil-producing companies, for example. But what's incredible is that a lot of these companies are still free of charge. Facebook, Google, Tencent. So they offer free storage, geolocalization, navigation services, and search services, and communication at high speed. So the most sophisticated technologies all over the world are something you access every day free of charge, and you do it on a continual basis every day. And in business schools or engineering schools, we did not learn this, so it's a real problem for legacy companies to actually go through their digital transformation process. Another change is the paradigm change, and that's called open source. Now, when Rich Sammel invented Linux, he's on the picture here, he did not think that 25 years later, that 30 years later, that it would be the main power in the software. If you go on a platform such as GitHub, you have 50 million encoders there. 89% of the products on GitHub are open source. You can take the code, you can use it, you can use GitHub without knowing it, or the results of GitHub 100 times a day when you drive your car, when you go past a traffic light, when you use your mobile phone. In this room around us, there are probably hundreds of software pieces that have been written via this platform, GitHub, that means that you can share code messages and review them with other IT or computer scientists, and you no longer what we do now is we stick together pieces of software. No one would have guessed that this would have developed in this way. These are meta companies, and they weigh, for the first 100, they weigh the GDP weight of the OECD countries, the wealthiest countries in the world. So this is the emergence, or linked to the emergence of an industrial economic revolution, and we still haven't measured the result of this. If you think the digital revolution we've gone beyond it, that's wrong. We've only reached 10% of the potential of it. Now, a few ideas of what underlies this revolution. How do companies work, digital companies work? Well, they are platforms, that's the first thing. They are technological platforms. They rest on the unified data. They're no longer in silos. This data is no longer in silos, in departments. They're on a platform, this data, that's shared by the whole company with a great deal of safety, security, standardization within the distribution systems. But the other aspect of the platform is the management model. It's gone from a model that was almost solely vertical to a model that's far more cross-functional, and it's based mainly on the end of the silo of the project. In other words, thanks to support functions that are digital ones, well, you're going to be able to change the way the company is organized. So analytics, that means that you can share scenario in any company, communication systems, specialized chatting services, qualified ones, and then sharing of project systems, which mean that you can see the projects together and deal with them in a communal way. This would not have been possible without the cloud, and this means that the companies I was showing you earlier on, all of the unicorns, decacorns, centacorn companies, thousandcorn, billions of dollars, they rest mainly on the same management principle. So this, in other words, is a traditional company. The blocks at the bottom are information systems. They are self-sufficient and separate, and they don't really communicate. And then this is all overhauled, and the model becomes a system where the project system is predominant, and so the whole of data synchronizes the company, and this with high efficiency. These projects are mobile. You move from one project to another, and as my friends say this quite often in Silicon Valley, they say that hierarchy does not play a role. Hierarchy is the strategic vision and the management of the chaos when this happens, which happens in these companies. I'm not saying that these companies are fantastic. They do have social issues, but the management system is not something you can do away with. Companies that will remain a management model for the 21st century will disappear, because they will have 20th century will have loss of productivity because they are not productive enough. And these models intrinsically bring more production. And rather than running after innovation, you can precede it. You can decide to create a standard and a reference for your field of work, and you don't have to be a meta company to be able to do this. There are a whole lot of other examples of companies that have become must companies in their environment without necessarily having achieved the size of a giant company in Silicon Valley. And then there are other companies, industrial ones, they're not doing very well at the moment. I'm thinking of GE, Safran, and CFM International. They are putting these management processes in place to produce airplane reactors, and this means that they have to have 100% quality, and they do it with productivity levels that are non-comparable with their competitors, and they haven't actually moved on to these models yet. So until the COVID-19 crisis, the reactors of the planes were one of the major success, or the most successful commercial operations of all time, because the order form for CFM International was $270 billion, once again before this terrible crisis. And so all of this is pushing us to say the following. Well, we're going from a world in which the innovation cycles were managed and spread around countries. You had the regulation that structured the market, and now we're moving into a world where things are virtual, and so they're integrated and globalized. And a small startup that is situated in the Silicon Valley or in Beijing today could become totally or destructure a market because it might have created new processes. In real estate, we're thinking of Airbnb, it's B2C operation, but this is of great concern in some for some companies, and well, it was and it still is. This means that all of the innovation models have to be set up within the company. Now, what do? In general, they keep the organization as it is with the hierarchy, and they put breakthrough innovation in the middle. It's a sort of amazing project, and then the antibodies come and destroy the project. People who are against it destroy it. So what we need is to take from different places in the hierarchical system, so in staff, top management, and right in the middle of that hierarchical system, people to whom we give these innovative projects to run. And this is something I've done with several companies in the world. I haven't invented this. Coulter actually, guru of American management, or American guru of management, invented this, and then you bring a project that becomes a wow project, and it's a reference in the company, and it leads all of the companies forwards in the long term. So this means that you're going to contaminate your company because it is going to have this project brought in, it's going to be in contact with this project, and then it's going to bring it back into a traditional organization that it's then going to hack to modify and to put it into a new system. This is very important. I'm not, of course, in charge of managing innovation in my company, but rather than concentrating on AI and blockchains, and even to a certain extent the technological infrastructure, what is important is that we need to start with the management model and the governance itself of the company. Now, another aspect that is really also developed is think in the name of the user. Be obsessed by what the user would do or think. And this is interesting when you do this, because generally companies in the 21st century set up a silo system of specialization, and from a cultural point of view they find it very difficult to remove themselves from this, which I'm talking about banks, financial services in general, any type of service really. And here you have a structural representation of property for office space. So when you're a user, basic user, a manager going to work on a daily basis or 3 times per day if they are working from home half-time, then you're in this sort of broken service. You have different services. You go to the kindergarten, take your children to school or to the kindergarten, then you could take a bus or you take your own car, you arrive in the company, you have a remote conference or a meeting with people. Your company supplies a certain number of additional services, and all of this, often it's integrated, but most of the time it's very, very sort of broken up. And so the power of digital platforms is that they take these services and they unify them. They do what are called seamless experiments that are integrated. In property management, commercial property management, or commercial property, I'm not going to mention names. You can see this starting to happen, and it's being developed to react to the advent of GAFAs. They have their eye on this, and also e-trade is taking on new power, and we try to help people and take them by the hand and try to develop the experience and create this new type of experience. And I think this is what you need to think about and how you need to think about it. When people come into the mall, that's not when they need to be led by the hand. They need to be led by the hand where things make their life easier. And I'm saying this because I talked about my friends earlier on who work in major companies in Silicon Valley, but they talk about an experience that is fantastic. They have a concierge. They've left the keys on a permanent basis with the concierge. And people can send plumbers or repair things in their flat while they're not there, and they clean, and this is all integrated. Of course, they're wealthy, so it's easier for them to do this, but it's also easier for them to do it because they have the data, and the data helps them set up this type of experience. They know where the keys are, they know what's happening in the flat, there's a picture of the issue that needs to be sorted, and all of the experiments or experiences are created from beginning to end. They integrate school, nursery, the way you eat, and all sorts of different other things. It's absolutely incredible. And if they do it, it's because they actually learn from it. And in the future, they're thinking, and this is what all companies are saying in the Silicon Valley, or all GAFAs, we're only developing a service if it can weigh between now and the next 10 years, $10,000 in turnover. So the conciergerie services, for example, will have a reach all over the place. And so it's best if you do this in the future in your company rather than get these concierge services to do it. So it's multi-face, bi-face, and they integrate data and they integrate people and companies that do different things. We're not just talking about tradespeople or shops or consumers. No, we're talking about integrating other types of players. And once again, I mentioned Airbnb earlier on, but it's actually quite incredible to see what a plethora of players revolve around Airbnb. Some people even do quite major repair work, and they're associated with Airbnb, and they can help you to change or renovate your house if you change it, for example, into one of their Airbnb hotels, quote unquote. It makes you rethink about this creation of value system. The partners who were strategic partners in the company and historic ones are then put on a second level, and people that you'd never thought about suddenly become first-range partners. Now, very quickly, 4 ideas that you need to bear in mind in order to succeed in digital transformation. First of all, no digital transformation is possible if you do not have the CEO on board, the executive committee to support the board with a strategic vision supporting the CEO, the general director or the CEO. And generally, it's more interesting when you're a listed company, especially a French major company, and it's better to have pension funds on board. If you miss a quarter, the pension funds will go for you straight away. So you need to tell them, well, you need to transfer funds. It's going to take time. You say we're transferring funds. We're not going to necessarily have growth that's as strong as it was in the past, but at least the company is going to be safe and secure for the 21st century. This is not easy to do. I often talk about this with major industrialists in France, and they say that it's a nightmare to end up or be able to transfer this message to the major institutional shareholders. But it is essential. If you are a small company, the same applies, with, of course, stakeholders that are not of the same type, but it's essential to agree all together on the fact that we're going to go down the route that was not necessarily the route that one knew 20, 30, 40, 50, 60 years ago, or even the century before for some companies. And so it's not a choice, it's essential. Now, second idea, and I said this earlier on, they often say, well, it's technology. Yes, it is technology, but technology are people. And so your challenge is the employer's brand, training, in-house training, recruiting the best, people and people again, once again. And this, I think, is a problem in the company. I don't know many companies that are able to plan for this. And in fact, the third aspect here is creating a vision that underpins the strategy and a strategy that underpins the roadmap. 3 roadmaps. One for people, I've just said it. It means that you can plan on the midterm recruitment, an infrastructure for technology roadmap. This is what will enable the exposure of data to all colleagues. And then governance roadmap. How do we reduce the number of hierarchical levels? How do we, little by little, move the company into a project mode? It can't be done overnight. And so you might as well put this into light or into perspective to do this. And then fourthly, and I talked about this earlier on, creating a data culture, a design culture. This is truly important. Telling people wherever they are, whether they're in management control, financial control, marketing, well, the only person who is the most important as the CEO, as the executive members of the board, is the user. And when I say the user, I'm not saying client, I'm saying user, because actually the user produces data, and the data is at least as important in the company as customer satisfaction, which means that it is a reflection of the capability to bring together a whole lot of stakeholders who take part in the customer satisfaction process. So it's the capacity to create a design experience with data that is very important in the company. And these are ideas that are very difficult to push, especially when you're in a conference where you're trying to talk about everything in 40 minutes. But anyway, this is absolutely essential in order to succeed. So, of course, I talked earlier on about, and I'll talk about this later on, all of the dystopic or dystopia elements, 2 dystopic or dystopia elements. I'm not going to talk about totalitarian systems and GAFAs. Now, what's important for companies? Governance of data. If you're not able to govern data in an intelligent way, you end up such as Sony Studios ended up in the United States. You have leaks of data, and then you fully lose the trust of your consumers and users, and this in a general way. But even without the leaking of data, having the appropriate data governance and respecting people and ensuring that when they say once to you that they do not want to have notifications on their mobile telephone, then you don't just try a couple of weeks later to send them a notification with a trick that most of the app suppliers provide. At least on my phone, I should imagine that you have pretty much the same experience. And then the other aspect is the cybersecurity aspect, which of course is a main challenge. I have many meetings that I hold on this topic, and you cannot imagine to what extent this is going to become something that is first of all, a geostrategic element. It's no longer just hackers, the states actually hacking, and there's also something to do with competition, because unfortunately some companies are going to not necessarily play the game within their ecosystem, and collectively we will, or communally, we're able to deal with these threats in an efficient way. So cybersecurity investments are essential, and thankfully we are starting to see the beginnings in France of the awareness of this type of thing. I'm saying this because, and if you want to come and look at this environment, read a book that I found amazing, the best read, I think, over the past 4 years. It's called Sandworm, and it explains to what extent we are exposed, and it's written by a Wired journalist who's a star journalist. It's fantastic.
Okay, now a few words concerning real estate, generally speaking, which I believe are quite interesting. We've talked a lot about BIM. I hope I'm not going to offend anyone here. Now, I'm kind of, let's say, I have doubts, right, when it comes to BIM, and I'd rather go for the free flow of data, right? So it's ecosystems that are capable of standardizing APIs, so taking exchange of data. I believe this will lead to very powerful BIMs. I'm not that much convinced by proprietary systems. I can see the market how it is today. Quite great projects out there and initiatives, but then, yeah, if you take the data linked to the models before the building will be linked to the maintenance and management of the building in the future, right? So these need to be links, and these are let's say the difference between people who do BIM today and myself is that we need an open standard. Obviously, we need to take into account security and safety aspects. Then another thing, I think too many people go about real estate as being a stock, right? It's not the case. Real estate is about flows of people, flows of energy, flows of goods within the real estate. And I think it's quite interesting to think about your business as in a flow, right? Because this allows you to, let's say, take a step back and not talk about ownership, but just talk about or think about flows. And if you bring it down to data, right? So you just think about flows, data, and flat, right? Flat flows. I did this exercise in a workshop, I think a year ago now, and at the end of this exercise, everyone was quite impressed about the business opportunities. It was amazing if you go about the business in this way, right? So not a supply of finished buildings, right? And I know that quite a lot of you go about your activity in this way, but I think, yeah, you need to try at least this approach. And then more or less on the same line here, I mentioned crowd intelligence and data, right? Well, you need this to be you need to take on board communities. If you have engaged communities, they are the stakeholders of the buildings, right? And you can actually have stakeholder communities, right? People who are not happy about why you're building this or that. You need to understand this. You need to interact with them. It could be on social network. It could be on dedicated platform. You name it. But all of this has a lot of value. Why? Because it's having all these commitments, engagements that will allow you to do the math. 2 and 2 equals 5, right? Thanks to the new business opportunities based on data. And then the last thing I believe is going to be a big thing in the years to come. This has to do with the sustainability of infrastructure, namely. Right, what I'm saying. Today we have this existing and growing constraint, right? But it's going to be completely different, and it would be completely different if we consider this within the frame of digital. I was part of the Réinventer Paris, Reinvent Paris jury, so this was a project that was allocated to a few builders. Some of whom are in this room. Anyway, but the idea was to consider how, with a smarter approach, one could reduce reduce the complexity of the project. Well, anyway, if we take this, even at the level of Europe, of the EU, right, building a school, there's so many gains that could be done. For a school, it could be 20% with these smarter approaches. You can create additional services. It's quite impressive what can be done. And basically, this is what Reinvent Paris tried to do. And this is probably going to be the standard for tomorrow. And then also, and this is something the EU is really working on, this is completely reorganizing the building industry and trying to attach to the material used for construction a value, and a value that is linked to time. It has to do obviously with the maintenance, the management of the building, right? But the data obviously is going to impact what you do, and perhaps even more than in other industries, businesses. And it will be at the core of what you do. Right, so this is the end of my presentation. I still have 9 minutes, I believe, to take a few questions and provide you with the answers to these questions. Thank you very much. Right, so the questions, please ask them via Slido. Ooh, that's not going to be easy. I think some people would like to ask the questions without the microphone. No, sorry, no. Oh, I can do it. No, this is the new world. Hehe. Need to play it by the rules. Don't touch the microphone, Sarah. Right, sorry. So you talked about flows in supply chain. You said we needed to rethink flows. Can't remember exactly how you said this. Could you perhaps tell us more about this? Right, okay. Now, listen, in the industry, who, where, what do we consume industry? Well, some people would say, okay, concrete, making concrete, right? But no, 90% is in supply chain. 70% of the carbon print is transport. Stocks, transports, with very low profit, by the way. Now, obviously, it's going to be the benefit of some people and some let's say players in the supply chain. But if you limit the supply chain, you increase the load of your trucks, you reduce stocks. Obviously, well, you make money, right? Okay, I can take an example. I find this is crazy, by the way. Company parking lots, right? The occupancy rate is roughly 5%, and if you take a car, it's 1.9 users per car in France. So the model is, at some point in time, going to be seen as crazy, right? Having been crazy. Now, the idea is to create experiences that are quality experiences, right? So instead of being stuffed in the commuter train, well, use a car, but not use it on your own, right? The migration that has been done in Paris with cycle lanes everywhere being just imposed on the people is perhaps a bit aggressive. But in any case, I believe that real estate companies have their word to say here, right? And this does not necessarily mean growing beans on the roof of your buildings, right? I mean, there are limits, obviously, to what can be done. But it's just thinking outside the box. It's just trying to do things differently. I mean, there are things that are quite interesting. But then there needs to be a scientific approach. If you take, for instance, the flow in your buildings, right? You have so many people in this building. They need various services. They need to be fed, right? And this leads to external users, external services that can be studied and worked on thanks to data. And this can allow you to rethink the way you build those buildings, right? And I'm just saying this from the top of my head, right? Because it could be interesting to calculate the impact in terms of transport if you had people hire at 8 o'clock and some at 9 o'clock, right? If you do this in the context of COVID, if you do this permanently, what is the organization, right? With schools, kindergartens, shopping, and all the other services, right? This is your job, I believe. And if you do this, you will continue to create value. And one day, people say, okay, we need to increase the load rate of the building and so on. Because when you look at the space that is occupied by people in France, I think it's been multiplied by 20 in the last century. But at some point, we need to stop. I have a question here. What's your opinion about edge computing, and namely in the building industry? Great question. Answer could be quite long. I'm going to try to do this as short as possible. So edge, right? Instead of having a decentralized computation in a cloud, probably in California, well, the idea is to have part of the calculation done locally. Now, nowadays we talk about fog, right? So you have cloud and local calculation at the same time. Now, there's hedge that is being done everywhere, right? So you do local calculation, and then you only send what is important to the server. Now, I believe that the hedge type infrastructures are going to multiply. When you take Netflix, right? People say, okay, Netflix consumes a lot in the US. No. Netflix, the flow is just roughly 100 kilometers, right? In Paris, it's 10 kilometers because you have a server in a data center which is locally set. Tomorrow, people in companies are going to have to make choices between mini data centers that are going to manage the connected objects in your building and those that require artificial intelligence, for which we will have to use additional learning, which will then be transferred to the local data center in order to make the building smart. And this, by the way, leads some people who do planning, who think about the way companies are organized to include these services and these approaches, to have data centers much smaller, but within the companies. And this is not the same type of calculation, but it's something you need to bear in mind nonetheless. Okay, 2 minutes and 40 seconds if you want to take a go. Slido is the app, right? Slido, yeah, great, thank you.
Monsieur, il a une question. Je ne sais pas si on va aller en prison parce que...
Hello, my name is Mr. Wub. I'm a real estate agent. I'd just like to come back to the notion of flow. Is it possible for you to perhaps take us a little further in? Because I'm quite interested. Yeah, but what do you mean? Right, no, I mean, what is the way? No, okay, what is the approach? How could we take this flow as a real estate agent? I think I get it now, right. Okay, the most simple thing to do is to create a workshop on this, right? So bring together the various stakeholders, so your clients, your suppliers, people who repair buildings, just bring them together. get someone who understands a bit about digital, has a digital mindset. It's perhaps not going to be easy for you to find such a person, but I can give you, okay, if you ask me on Twitter, I can send you data of people who are quite good at this, and then you can spend 2-3 hours, quite interesting, which will allow you to identify business opportunities for you, right? So they're probably not going to be the same if you are CDRE or a small, I don't know if Severo still exists, but anyway, or a small agency. Sorry for that, oops. So you still exist, okay, cool. So not the same opportunities, right? But you will find the right level according to what you need, and then based on that you do your prototype, right? I talked about build to fail at the time, right? So you just do a quick prototype, and you just see if there's anything in there for you. I hope that answered the question. And then we have one last question here. How can you bring together ecology and mass deployment of new IoT equipment? Well, same thing here. I'm going to be quite straightforward with you, and I've published a few things on this, by the way. The debate consists, let's say that, okay, 5G and the rebound effect and so on, boo-boo, rubbish. Why? Okay. Now, every calculation that's been done on the efficiency gain of digital systems show gains that are absolutely completely significant. If you take the footprint, right? If you take truck loads between 2000 and 2017, increased by 14%. So that's roughly hundreds of trucks less and hundreds of millions of kilometers less, because the trucks are laden in a smarter way. How is this possible? Thanks to information systems. This is digital, right? So it comes back to what I said earlier on. It's this ability to better use stock, better use inventories, to have the right level of flow with your stock, right? And every study will show this. I talked about Shannon earlier on. Shannon was the genius who created the theory of information in 1948, if I'm correct. And what he said is, you put information in the system, and it's just so much more efficient than it was before that. It wouldn't be possible to manage the world without information, right? Now, 5G, you didn't talk about it, so I'm going to talk about it, right? 5G is so extraordinary. From a functional point of view, it's less energy, much more data flows. So if we were to suppress 2, 3, and 4G and only have 5G, or let's say only have 4 and 5G, which is possible, by the way, and this is the French approach, with so much more data. I came across this study on Friday. You diminish the flow by 1/3, the energy flow, that is, right? And beyond this, these are buildings that are better with the less consumption, less heating use, vehicles are better used. It sounds stupid perhaps, but autonomous vehicles, for instance, if an autonomous vehicle really becomes a thing, right, this 4% use I mentioned earlier on will move to 20%, right? Because you won't be owners of your cars, and your cars during the night will be used to distribute parcels, let's say, right? And so all of this is a change of paradigm. No more parking lots. So big spaces that can be used, less urban sprawl. It's just a new world. So going against 5G is going against the potential of the world. Now, then obviously there are some things, right? So watching a 4K movie on the smartphone doesn't really make sense. But then this means regulation, right? And setting the right rules in the industry. And this is not too difficult to implement, I'd say, rather than deciding if we do or not, or if we go or not for 5G. I think this is it, right? Thank you very much.